Sorry about that. Having a little, the usual technical difficulties on a Tuesday night. How is everybody this evening on this very warm Tuesday night in April? My goodness, got short sleeves on for the first time this year. Pretty exciting. We have all kinds of cool things we're going to go over today, folks. So as usual, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with introductions. We're just going to hop on to our screen share and this week's slideshow. Hang on just a second, we'll get it going. All right, if you had a chance to read last week's column, you'll know that I was once again vexed by this species we call butternut. This is a plant that's haunted me, I'll be honest, for years. I would say 8 or more years ago, I started finding butternuts hidden around my yard. Butternut, it's an unusual species for this area. It really shouldn't be. It's a tree that should grow well in this climate, but as we'll see in a few slides, it's been having some troubles of late. But you can see in this picture here, this is a butternut nut, and I've been finding them around my house. I don't know if a squirrel was bringing them. I don't know if a crow was stashing them. I could not figure out where they came from. And just about the time I figured out, or I thought I narrowed it down to a couple of yards that were about a block away from me, which by the way would be a long ways for a squirrel to carry a nut. So that would sort of support the crow theory. But anyway, just about the time I was ready to go knock on some doors and ask if I could look at some trees up close. The trees that I thought might be the butternut were cut down and replaced, which in a way might support my theory, because again, this tree is having some difficulties. But then lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, I'm walking home from work, and what do I see laying in the grass over at Bakerfield Park here in St. Charles, but a butternut. This one, I don't know if it was from last fall. I'm actually holding it in my hand right now. It's been poking me in the pocket for 2 weeks. It'll probably continue to do so because I think if I just carry it around with me, maybe it'll bring me some luck and maybe I'll find the mother tree. The nut's still inside, I can feel it rattling. But anyway, you can see, in fact, this photo here is a great indication of how minute some little communities can be. There's little tiny webs that formed. Some little creatures were living in the very deep furrows and grooves of this most unusual nut. Those have kind of fallen off as this nut has spent time with, in my pocket these last couple of weeks. But I've been searching once again, for the mother butternut. And here's what I'm working with. I don't think I've ever actually seen a live butternut, but studying what field guides say and what Google has to say, there's some obvious differences between butternut, which is also called white walnut, and its much more familiar cousin, the black walnut. I'm pretty familiar with black walnut bark. I grew up, in fact, the tree is still in front of my mom's house. I see the bark every week. You can see that these furrows in the bark are quite broken up. There's not any kind of length to those grooves and furrows, whereas the butternut, it has that same thick, chunky kind of bark, but the grooves, this almost reminds me of the furrows in the structure that you might see on, say, a black locust tree. But it's a bark that I think I would recognize if I was able to actually get up close to one of these trees. So far, I haven't seen it, nor have I seen the nuts with the husk still on it. Now, On the left here, we've got our very familiar black walnut with those, that green husk that has that very, I think, refreshing citrusy kind of aroma to it. In fact, one of the stories I've always heard about black walnuts is that settlers would use them as a kind of a sachet since things like wash machines and laundromats weren't very prevalent as settlers were coming to this area. They would use black walnuts to, they would store those, the green husks alongside some of their clothing to help maybe freshen it up a little bit. Don't know if the butternut has the same sort of aroma to it, but you can see just by looking at it, you can tell it's a very different species, different kind of nut. There's a lot more fuzz. In fact, it almost looks a little bit like a kiwi, doesn't it? And it's elongated, much the way the nut itself is elongated. A black walnut is fairly round once you get that husk off. And the butternut is very round or oval shaped. One other characteristic that I have not yet been able to look for because I can't find the butternut tree is the leaf scar or the bud scar that we see on the twigs of these plants. On the left, we've got the monkey face of the black walnut. And on the right, we have what I think of as a monkey face with a unibrow, the scar of the
two eyes.
So again, I haven't been able to find these to compare them, but these are characteristics that I'm going to be looking for. Hopefully you can look for them too. I've actually, since that column ran, I've heard from a few people, nobody here in the Tri-Cities, but Good Natured is run by Shaw Media in a number of their papers throughout Northern Illinois. So I've heard from people in counties west of here. And I just got a phone call again this evening from someone who's got some young butternuts. The U.S. Forest Service, the North Research Unit of the Forest Service, is actually investigating butternuts and looking at where healthy butternuts are growing, because we have a lot of sick butternuts. We have a lot of trees that are not surviving because of this fungus here. And I'll give a shiny new dime to anybody who's willing to try and pronounce that. Ophiognomonia clavinenti euglendicerium, maybe? Yeah, I'm not going to say that again, but this is a fungus that causes wounds or cankers in the bark of the butternut tree. That black walnuts don't seem to be susceptible to this fungus, but it is wreaking havoc in our white walnuts. What the researchers have been able to determine so far is that it appears to be a non-native, that it may have been introduced when walnut trees were imported from Asia. And they think that it's spread, but like in a butternut grove, it might be spread when rain hits the trees, and fungal spores will be hit by the raindrops, and they'll move from tree to tree. They also feel that insects might also be transporting these spores around. So it's really caused a sharp decline in the number of butternut trees we have in Eastern North America, which this is a tree of the East and Northeast. We don't see this tree out on the West Coast or anything, but it's a problem. And it's something that thankfully there does seem to be some resistance to this fungus. Like I said, some of these people have been contacting me, say, oh my gosh, we've had butternuts on our property for years, but I'm wondering if maybe in more populated areas where non-native or nursery stock might have been planted, if maybe this is a disease that is more prevalent in these populated areas. I don't know, but it encourages, I find encouragement in these nuts that they keep showing up. There's got to be at least one butternut around here that's healthy enough to continue producing nuts. I'm going to keep the search on, and I encourage you to do the same. Please, please let me know if you're aware of a healthy nut or white walnut tree in your own neighborhood. I'd love to come and check it out, see one of these trees in person. Now, are going to consider this bird here. Pretty familiar bird. It's the great blue heron. I think you've probably seen them fishing in the shallows of, whether it's the Fox River or one of its tributaries. All right, I'm going to stop that music because I got more to say. Just setting the mood for the blues. This is a very successful species as our fish population, as our water has gotten cleaner in this area, our fish population has rebounded, and so have the things that eat the fish. We've talked about this with bald eagles, and we've talked about this with ospreys. Our wading birds that eat fish too are doing well as a result of our cleaner water. But you know, there's another side to these birds. When they make their living by wading in the shallows of rivers and streams and ponds and looking for fish and other food, things can get a little messy when they're splashing around trying to catch, say, a water snake. Or maybe they're in a pond that's covered in duckweed, which, by the way, duckweed, you know, I was over at Delnor Woods the other day. Delnor used to have a lovely coating of duckweed over that front pond on Route 25, but that was deemed to be not desirable by some powers that be. So now there's a huge aerator there. It was, like I said, when I was there today, and it sounds like Niagara Falls. This thing is, you know, blowing water up in the air. It's aerating the water. Duckweed does not like to live in water that is moving. So it's a pretty effectively taking care of this cute, I believe duckweed is our smallest flowering plant. I'm rambling now. My point is, when a great blue heron is fishing, the conditions aren't always pristine. It can be kind of a messy job. Those feathers can get sticky, they can get full of fish slime, they can get full of algae or duckweed, and they need a way to clean up. That is the plight of the great blue heron. The thing is, they can't go to the groomer. They can't get combed out the way we do ourselves or our pets. There's no such thing as a great blue heron salon. But what we do have, or what they do have, is a really cool adaptation. Check out these two photos. Can you see what these birds are doing?
Scratching.
Birds have 4 toes on their feet. 3 forward and 1 back. The toe of those forward toes is a little bit longer than the other ones, probably for stability as much as anything, but it's got an amazing adaptation on it. Here we can see a little bit of an up close. See how that heron is kind of raking that middle claw across its feathers? It's no coincidence that it's using that particular toe. Herons are one of a select few birds that have what we call a pectinate claw, which is basically a comb on that middle toe. It's thought that it's not just for neatness and appearance. This is something that's also quite useful for combing out parasites. Say if it's got, birds are notorious for having lice in their feathers, and a little comb structure like this can be run through the feathers, and those ectoparasites can be combed away. But it's also useful for combing out things that shouldn't be in the feathers, like say duckweed or fish slime. So this pectinate claw is very useful. And you know, I was doing a little reading on this topic, and it's an adaptation that isn't across the board. It's found in various species of these different families: the herons, the nightjars, which includes our common nighthawk, owls, frigatebirds, terns, grebes, cormorants, the dipper. If you've ever seen the dipper in action, that's really cool. The American dipper actually wades in the water, but they wade under the water. So there's a lot of diversity amongst these birds that have this feature. An owl, for instance, is very different from a heron, and a nighthawk is very different from a heron or an owl. So there's not really any clear evolutionary line showing how this, how some species got this or not. Here's a little video that shows a barn owl, which is I believe barn owls are the only owls that have pectinate claws, but they use them for grooming. In this case, it's not removing fish slime, it's probably going after dander or again, some of those ectoparasites. But it's kind of a neat thing. It helps makes the bird's life just a little bit easier. Now, in the case of herons, they have another adaptation. And again, they're not the only birds that have this, but powdered down feathers are really useful for birds that might get messy when they're feeding. Herons, egrets, bitterns all have powdered down feathers. They're usually, in those three types of birds, the powdered down feathers are usually located on the breast, and they're distributed by that pectinate claw and the bill as well. That powder, these feathers don't molt, they continue to grow, and the bird will pull on them, and the barbs on the feathers, your feathers are barbs that they're made up of barbs that knit together. With the down, powder down, that those barbs are made to kind of fall apart, and they form a powder it's almost like talcum powder, but it's got just a little bit of oil to it. And by working that through the feathers, that helps absorb things like fish slime, helps keep the feathers knitted properly together. It can also help because of that oil and the way it helps the feathers lay. It helps aid in the water resistance of those feathers. Now, another group of birds that has powder down are some of our parrots. You might know I've got my bird Tommy, King Tom, the macaw. Macaws aren't really famous for powder down, but cockatoos are, and cockatiels. In fact, I've known people who've had to rehome their birds because they have an allergy to that powder down. It can form a kind of a white film around, a fine dusty film around the bird cage and the area around in the bird room. But they use that just like the herons do, to work through their feathers, keep the feathers in top condition. So it's another kind of neat adaptation. It's not terribly common throughout the bird world, but the birds that have it, it really helps suit them for the work that they have at hand in terms of feeding and the habitats that they live in. Now, David Allen Sibley, you might know him as the author of the famous Sibley Field Guides. He was writing about powder down, and he used the black-crowned night heron as an example of how these birds work this down through their feathers. And he feels that it might actually play a role in breeding and keeping the feathers in top condition during the breeding season. He said that in the non-breeding season, the black-crowned night heron will have this really kind of dark black, well, where it gets its name, black crown. But then, and its bill will sometimes have a lighter color to it. But during the breeding season, the bill turns dark. And he said that some birds, he first noticed it in Africa, but he's also seen it now in the United States too. The birds change from a jet black color to kind of a slatey gray blue color. And he feels that that's, it's kind of like, when you go out on a date and you put a lot of cologne or perfume on, and you maybe slick your hair back with some greasy kid stuff, that maybe these birds are adding extra powder down to the feathers so they can stay nice as they're going about the the business of breeding. But it's kind of an interesting thing to look for. Black-crowned night herons, I didn't check to see the latest iteration, which came out in 2020 of the Illinois state endangered and threatened species list. But they have always been considered an endangered species here in Illinois. But here in the Tri-Cities, we actually have several pairs that have been breeding. You can oftentimes spot them along the Fox River near the Batavia Dam. And last year they started showing up in some ponds to the west of downtown Geneva. So I'm going to see if I can track down some of these birds. Not very good at photography, but maybe I could at least see it with my binoculars and report back to you. But anyway, that's what Sibley's thoughts are on this powder down in the black-crowned night heron. Maybe it's also playing a similar role in some of our other heron and egret species. So now we're going to stay with the topic of herons, but I know some of you are a little sensitive about seeing dead stuff. So if you're one of those people, you want to avert your eyes for just a few minutes. This is a call that we received a couple of weeks ago. This was a gentleman out west of town here in Virgil, Illinois. And he found this bird in his pond and it was deceased. Don't know exactly what happened. It may have some wing damage, but this was otherwise in very, very good shape. It's got its breeding plumage, the long feathers up here on the top and along the breast. It's a beautiful, beautiful bird. It's our hope that we'll be able to get this heron taxidermied so that we can have it on display at Hickory Knolls, and you'll be able to maybe even see those pectinate claws up close once the bird comes back. So it's in the freezer right now, but I wanted to get a sense of just how large.
Hope they don't eat it.
There's the soon to be world famous tube of Blistex that I always have with me as a size of measurement. That's 2 5/8 inches long. That bill is really another marvelous adaptation that these birds have. Not only is it good grabbing things like food out of the water, but it's also used in defense. I know people who have done great blue heron rescue. Maybe a bird has been entangled in fishing line and they've had to go in and rescue it, but they can actually use that bill to stab at and fend off things that they seem as threats. But I'm very hopeful that we're going to get this bird mounted. Taxidermy, in fact, I was just talking, getting some names of taxidermists locally, and I found out that because there's so few these days, that there's quite a wait between when you drop your bird off and when you get your bird back. But let's keep our fingers crossed that one day Hickory Knolls will have a great blue heron on display, thanks to one Mr. Clark Andrews. Now, we'll get away. You can come back if you're hiding your eyes. We're not looking at the dead bird anymore. This is a little video that I took last week this is the Fox River south of Red Oak Nature Center. Some of you nature nerds that have tuned in, you recognize this. There is a rookery, and this is how herons and egrets will nest. They build these, they nest communally in dead, or well, actually they're not always dead trees, but trees that are near water, near their food source. And this rookery appears to be growing, and it's kind of neat because there are both great blue herons and white egrets nesting there. So great egrets nesting there. So if you happen to be, looking for a place to go, if you head to Red Oak, which is on Route 25, about 2.5 miles south of Wilson Street in Batavia, or about a half mile north of Route 56 in North Aurora. You can go park, walk down south on the bike path, and once you get past the cave, start looking to the islands that would be to the west of the bike trail there. And chances are you'll see the adult birds flying. They make kind of a weird like croaking sound, rah, rah, rah. Sometimes you'll hear that as you're walking along too. But it's a neat.
I've never heard that.
highly recommend checking it out. Take your binoculars, because as you can see, this was just cell phone footage. There is a distance between where you are on the path and where those bird nests are. But it's pretty cool, and it's close by. You might want to check it out. Now, just a little bit further down the path, you start seeing signs like this. I thought this was kind of cool. It almost looked like the beavers at work there were, doing a little artwork. Maybe this is their rendition of modern art of some sort. It also kind of looks like a cannon, actually. Well, this is a sign that you're getting very close to what I thought was really interesting. This is sort of a combination beaver lodge and beaver lodge, and also a bank den. These beavers have a piled up, there's mud and sticks here. And it's pretty, you can walk right by it and just think you're walking past a pile of mud and sticks. But if you look a little bit more closely, you'll see there's signs of life. And from what I understand, the beavers are, you can, if you're very, very quiet and maybe you stand a bit away so that they don't know you're there, that they, the babies especially, they said, have been coming out in the daytime. So that if you do journey down that way, that might be something you'd want to check out. Now, if you've been a long-time subscriber to the Good Natured Hour, I've got this thing about spiders, and you might also know that I had, if you're not a long-time subscriber, I'll fill you in. I had a spider we call dining room spider that was a grass spider that I brought inside last fall. I kind of felt sorry for her. And she lived on my dining room table in an aquarium. Always have to clarify that. She was not just on the table, but she lived indoors from say late October until she died the last weekend of February. So the spider tank sat empty for a little while. And then as we got into early April, the temperatures were kind of starting to warm up, starting to moderate a little bit. And our local spider population started becoming active again. Now, we've talked in past weeks about the salamander monitoring that's going on at Hickory Knolls. Part of that effort involved creating what we call pitfall traps, which is basically burying a bucket in the ground so that it is level, the top of the bucket is level with the ground. So anything that walks along will fall in. Now the science there is to try and get a handle on the size of the salamander population in the natural area at Hickory Knolls, but the kind of side effect of that is that you're catching a lot of other things besides salamanders in those pitfall traps. And I would go out there and rescue not the salamanders, because somebody had usually already gotten those, but these are all the other things that aren't part of the study that were still nonetheless stuck in these buckets. I can't tell you if it was dozens or maybe even hundreds of wolf spiders, young wolf spiders that were out and about. So I ended up bringing one of them home with me. And I thought, I'm going to try and figure out what kind of spider this is. Well, the wolf spider is part of the family Lycosidae, which means wolf. But there are over 100 different species of wolf spiders in North America, and there's quite a few here in Illinois, and there are all kinds of little details that you need to look at. One thing I'll point out here that you can keep in mind should you want to go down this identification journey on your own. Spiders oftentimes have what's called a cardiac mark, and it is on the spider's abdomen, and it's above where the spider's heart is. Some cardiac marks are light, is the case with this spider, and some cardiac marks are dark. That got me a little ways down the identification journey, but I've still got a ways to go. So we still don't know exactly who this spider is. But what I was struck by was that her feeding, so wolf spiders, they're known to be very, very good predators. Oh, I forgot, that's Miss Grass Spider. I forgot I put her in here. May she rest in peace. But here's our Here's our wolf spider again. And all the references about wolf spiders, we'll talk about how they are predators, they're ambush predators, and they're active hunters. They spot their victim, they give chase, they capture it, they inject it with paralyzing venom. Well, I kept putting small bugs in for who I've named Wolfie, or Wolferetta because she's a female, and she wasn't really feeding. Most of the bugs I was finding were about her size, and she seemed almost afraid of them. So I asked around a little bit, and I found out that young wolf spiders don't always capture their own prey, that they will scavenge either something that a larger spider has killed or something else has eaten off of. They eat dead stuff. So I started giving Wolfie some freshly killed insects, which is not exactly, it doesn't really line up with this whole reputation that wolf spiders have, but I have to say she is doing remarkably well. She pounces on them. Maybe this is how young spiders get their hunting skills. She does ambush it, even though it's not going anywhere. And then she'll drag it back. She's put some, even though wolf spiders do not capture prey in webs, she does have a few little strands of silk around her tank, and she'll follow those back to the little lair that she has underneath a piece of bark. And so she's doing really well. I'll keep you posted, I will, on how she's doing. But the other thing I wanted to point out, look at these eyes. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's even more under here. Wolf spiders have 8 eyes in this sort of an arrangement. This shows that they are sight hunters. Oops, I don't want to give that away. And they need that vision so that they can eventually, stalk and pounce and ambush their prey. But I also was struck by the way, I don't think I was using a flash, but she was feeding underneath the table, the light that's above my dining room table, and her eyes were reflecting. Remember when we talked about eye shine? New subscribers, just to fill you in briefly, if you've ever shined a light on an animal, a mammal, usually at night, their eyes reflect the light back at you, and different animals will sometimes have different colors to that reflection. That's because of this tapetum in by their retina that reflects light back. This is something you can try if you're into spiders, or actually if you're not into spiders and you want to know where they are when you're out at night, you might want to do this too so you can avoid them. But their eyes will reflect the light from your flashlight too. So keep that in mind. Maybe you'll find a wolfie or two of your own when you're out and about. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on her as she gets bigger, fingers crossed. So you might have noticed when I signed on this evening, the aquariums behind me have changed a little bit. We did some swapping with what's here at Good Natured World Headquarters and what's over at Hickory Knolls Discovery Center. We're getting ready for some school programs as well as some scout programs, and then of course our summer camps. This is a teaching insect, the Eastern Lubber grasshopper. We started using these, I don't know, gosh, probably over 5 years ago. This is a grasshopper. It's not native to this area, so we have to be very careful that we don't release it anywhere, even though it probably wouldn't survive our winters. A, our winters are getting milder, and B, these things have huge appetites. So even if they only lived until the first frost, they could do some damage. So we handle them very, very carefully. We're always counting them to make sure that we have the same number we started with. But this is, if you've ever spent any time in Florida, you might have heard of this grasshopper. It is not very well liked in its home range because of this tremendous appetite that it has. But I tell you, it shows everything you need to be able to see when you're teaching about insects. It's got the 6 legs, it's got the 3 body parts here, the head, the thorax, the abdomen, it's got 2 antennae. It does have wings. Wings are not a requirement for being classified as an insect, but these wings are called out in their species name, Microptera, micro and terra, little wings. These wings are not large enough for this to support this bug that can get to be about as big as your thumb. Very, very large insect. They also have this neat kind of a flash color of red, a warning coloration underneath the wings. These insects are very distasteful. It's one of the reasons why they can get to be somewhat pesty in their home range, the large appetite, and then the fact that very few things will eat them in their adult form. We ordered about a dozen of these insects. I have 4 of them here. Once we finish the slideshow, I can get one out if you want to see one up close, but they not only grow, and you can see this is an insect that goes through gradual metamorphosis. It's not a complete metamorphosis like we see with, say, beetles, or more famously our butterflies and our moths, which go through the caterpillar stage. They start off as an egg, they go to their larval or caterpillar stage, and then they go through a pupation where their body just gets all changed up. They grow wings, they grow different mouth parts. It's a very, very dramatic metamorphosis or transformation. These guys, it's just a gradual getting larger. A small grasshopper, and we see this with our local species as well. A young grasshopper looks just like a mature grasshopper, except it's smaller and its wing pads have not developed fully into wings. But it's like I said, it's an excellent teaching insect if you are at all interested in teaching people about insects. Shoot me an email. I could hook you up with some of these. But again, we have to be very, very careful because they are not native to this area. So with that, remember last week, I tried to show you the fox video and I couldn't. Well, was able to get a hold of the actual video. And I'll also give you a little update before we play this. This fox den was discovered about 2 weeks ago. It was actually, and this is fairly typical of red foxes. They don't always dig their own dens. They'll take over. It makes sense, you know, if something is already excavated, why go to all the trouble? This is a former woodchuck burrow that was adapted for use by a mom red fox. The homeowner, when she first sent me the video, well, she sent me a still shot, which I think we showed last week, and she didn't know what she had. I said, look for the white tip on the tail. That's the giveaway as to whether you're looking at a young fox or a young coyote. Once she became aware of what was going on underneath her garage, then she started looking for the parents, and she did see the red fox parents as well. But let's just take a minute here to watch these youngsters cavorting here. You can see one's got a little bit of prey in its mouth, looks like maybe a vole. I see a short tail, fat little baked potato shaped body. Goes down into the home den. And talk about cuteness. This is when they were just starting to explore the environment outside of the den. The update is that turns out there's 5 kits and they have now left this den and moved on. They've been sighted they're still in the neighborhood, but this is actually fairly typical behavior too. A mom fox does move her family around as they continue to grow. There's probably a few reasons for that. One is she wants to stay ahead of any potential predators that might be eyeing the home den. She's got to get these youngsters familiar with different sorts of environments. They're not going to be able to stay with her their whole lives. She wants to also maybe find other areas with prey, because feeding 5 mouths plus her own can put quite a demand on the local herbivores and whatever else she might be finding to feed her family. But anyway, I was so glad when the homeowner shared this video, because I wanted you guys to be able to see just how cute these young foxes can be. Now, this is something, Chris Madsen, I have to thank you for this. Can anybody see what's wrong with this picture?
The possum.
The raccoon removal experts, but that's no raccoon. Anyway, just kind of a funny thing. Always pays to look closely at the ads, the pop-up ads that come along, because that might, if you are actually looking for a wildlife removal expert, something like this might give you some pause and maybe cause you to make a different choice. Now, this just literally came in. I got a text from our marketing manager who's attending the park board meeting this evening, and she said that one of our board members wanted us to know that the snakes are back. You might remember hearing about this phenomenon last year about this time. What we're looking at are northern water snakes at Norris Woods in St. Charles. This is a behavior that a lot of times is associated with tropical areas, or like, say, you know, the Amazon River, you know, there'll be snakes draped in trees. But this is something that water snakes do, especially when they've got nice habitat like this. This is branches that are very close to the water. When a snake, we've talked about this before, when they come up from their hibernacula after spending a long cold winter down there, they need to warm up, they need to get some food in their bellies, they need to shed their skin, they need to find a mate, all kinds of things early in the season that they need to accomplish. Well, spreading out on branches like this helps keep their skin from forming blisters. When they've been in cold, damp conditions all winter, their skin can take a beating. I know we tend to think of snakes as slimy, but we also know they're not. They actually have dry, scaly skin, but it is prone to, if it doesn't have a chance to dry out, it is prone to forming blisters, which just as blisters are bad on human skin, they're bad on snake skins too. These animals can get infections, they can actually die from that condition. So very important that those skins dry out. You know, somebody had asked me when we talked about these ones before, how is it again that we know these are not venomous? Well, for one thing, we don't really have much in the way of venomous creatures here in, well, venomous reptiles anyway, in northeastern Illinois. But if you look at the patterns on these water snakes, you can see that it varies as it goes down the snake's body. Up by the neck, it's a complete band that goes from one side to the other. And as it goes down the body, that band separates and it becomes blotches. So there's blotches and then spots. I think I see a nice full belly right here. That's mission accomplished for that snake. But northern water snakes, extremely common around here. Right now, they're just interested in, I would imagine, from what this board member relayed, was that they were out today, which is so ironic. I was actually at Norris Woods earlier and I wanted to see if I could find some of these snakes on my own, and I just didn't have the time. So if you want to go check it out, I wouldn't recommend tomorrow. I think tomorrow's supposed to be cloudy and cooler, but another warm sunny day, we might see this again. This behavior kind of goes away once they have gotten their summer route down. They usually have the ability to stay warm and stay dry without stretching out on the branches like this. So it is kind of a springtime phenomenon. Limited time engagement. You might want to go check it out. Now, a couple of housekeeping things. This is something that we are promoting here in the nature department, this citywide nature challenge. This is part of actually an international competition. It started between two science museums in California several years ago. They once the platform iNaturalist became more known amongst more and more people were using that. And researchers started to realize the potential it had for storing data. These two museums challenged each other to see which museum could have more species spotted, how many reports could they get within a defined period of time. Well, it spread beyond those California nature museums throughout the state of California, throughout the Western United States. It then began to get sort of an international following. And now there's cities all over the globe that are participating in the City Nature Challenge. We're doing it here in St. Charles. If you want to participate, all you got to do is use the iNaturalist app. It's free. You can download it onto your cell phone. We want to see how many reports of things outside. You know what? Doesn't really even have to be native. We just want to see how many people we can get outside identifying or taking pictures of things in nature. You don't even have to identify it because that's what iNaturalist is there for. But we just kind of want to see how many people we can rally to get involved in the City Nature Challenge. Check it out. The name of our project on iNaturalist is City Nature Challenge 2021, St. Charles, Illinois. Check it out if you're so inclined. And one last thing, I got a couple of emails from people who were looking ahead and they said, hey, are you taking the summer off? There's no dates for Good Natured Hour past April. Well, that's because we at the Park District are changing our registration platform to something I hear is more user-friendly. One person has actually signed up for the May dates already, and she said it's much easier. You can sign up for multiple weeks at a time. So it's called Peak. And to find it, the best way I found to do that was to go to either our Park District website, stcparks.org, or our nature website, stcnature.org. On the Parks website, you can go to e-activities and find it there. The Good Natured Hour is listed there. On stcnature.org, look for Good Natured Hour. Notice there's no the in front of good, because the Good Natured Hour takes you to the pages that have it's kind of the repository for the newspaper columns. But Good Natured Hour is where you'll find registration information for the coming weeks. The other good news is that we're able to extend the free aspect of Good Natured Hour. It's the Hickory Knolls 10th anniversary, and we're trying to think of little ways to celebrate. And what better way to celebrate than to give away something for free? So we're going to continue free registrations at least through July, maybe longer than that. We'll see if we can keep that rolling. So those were our two housekeeping issues. For next week, we're going to be taking a look at red-headed woodpeckers. Actually, had some late breaking news on that front earlier this afternoon. So we'll bring you up to speed on what's going on with this very iconic woodpecker. When I was at Norris today, found a new to me wildflower. Maybe you are familiar with it. I'm going to use that as a little teaser to see if you'll come back next week and see what this flower is. Honestly, I thought it was something invasive. So I'm glad I didn't pull it out. And we're grateful that we were able to identify it just in time. Got some, I'm sure we'll have all kinds, because it is springtime, nature is popping up all over. We'll have some late breaking news there, reader emails, and lots more. So with that, I'm actually going to end the screen share. And there we go. I'm going to turn it over. It looks like we got some items in the chat. Sarah says that there's a couple of butternuts on the west side of the Arboretum. And Meg, you've got some herons on Fearson. We've got some issues with muting, but yeah, Meg, keep an eye on those herons on Fearson Creek and see if you can see them using their, actually, I need a pectinate claw tonight, don't I? Look at that. Maybe a little powder down would fix his hair up too. But yeah, watch for that grooming behavior, because it is really important. A bird's key to survival is those feathers. And if they're not in good shape, that bird is not going to be able to survive for very long. A good question from Wallace, the iNaturalist, the City Nature Challenge, it does need to be within the city limits, although Wallace, check with Creek Bend, because I believe they are doing a City Nature Challenge too. And that term city is kind of loosely defined. It's whatever agency or organization is conducting the challenge, they define the boundaries of it. So the Forest Preserve District might be doing something that's throughout King County. So check with them too and see what their parameters are. But as far as ours is, it's actually probably the boundaries of the Park District, which I can't even define. I have to look at a map because there's some neighborhoods where it's literally street to street. But yeah, it's a great chance to be able to get out and identify things. It's actually based on another a citizen science concept called the bio blitz. And bio blitzes are where they usually take place over a weekend, and the agency or organization will have all sorts of volunteers come out and they'll just crawl over. Usually it's a defined area like a park, and they will see how many species they can find. It can be a little intense on the landscape there, especially if you have a lot of people crawling around. It's always, people are always stressed to tread lightly and be sensitive and stay on trails and things like that. But it's, iNaturalist has a lot of capabilities for recording data year to year. Data isn't always helpful by itself, but when you compile things, records year after year after year, then you start to see trends, and that's where that data starts to come into play. So good questions here. I did have another thing I was going to share. I didn't get to take a picture of it, but I thought it probably is better if I didn't take a picture. Anyway, I was out in my backyard, and I'm not lucky enough to have a backyard that grows morels, although I did get a phone call at about 5 o'clock that there are some morels growing in a secret location, and I'm supposed to call the person back if I want to. So even though it's quite dry out, very, very dry out, I'm hoping we get some rain soon. Our different types of mushrooms are appearing on schedule. But I found this in my yard growing on my one of my dead box elder trees. This is that pheasant back mushroom that we talked about. Maybe it was just last week. This is edible. It grows into a very large fan-shaped fungus. And once it gets much bigger than this, it's not edible anymore. It's not poisonous. You don't have to worry about toxicity or anything, but it gets super tough. Some people will take those older ones and boil them to add flavor to stock, but you can't eat the mushroom itself. It just is so chewy. But this, you can see it gets its name pheasant back from the pattern on the top. Looks kind of like the feathers on the back of a pheasant. The other name you might recall is dryad saddle. Dryads are little wood nymphs, and I guess they sit on things like this. Another way to tell that this is still quite succulent and not too tough to eat. Here we're looking at the underside, and there are no visible, the pores are very, very small. You have to use a lens to see them up close. Once those pores enlarge and are visible to the naked eye, this is not, it's too tough to eat too. So not only is it morel season, but it is also dryad saddle / pheasant back season. All right. All right, we've got a question from Kay. Even though heron nests are in trees, do they ever tend to be in trees at other times of the year? That's a great question. They do roost in trees. In fact, those trees where that heron and egret rookery is in down south of Red Oak now, back when I worked there, that was in the early 2000s, and the egrets would go and they would roost in those trees at night. So roosting up high is important for birds like that. It frees them from terrestrial predators. They get up out of the water too. I would imagine their feet are a lot like ours, or a lot like snakes, where they do need to dry out. So yeah, they will go up in the trees to roost or to sleep at night. Gets them up out of harm's way. So And it's kind of like when you see a wood duck up in a tree and you're like, that looks a little weird. Those birds are usually down on the ground. It's the same kind of feeling when you see a heron. Herons have legs that are like 2 feet or more long. They've got these big wings and this, this long ungainly body and neck, and they land on a branch and it kind of bounces up and down. But once it settles down, they tuck in and they do sleep in trees at night too.
Huh, thank you. That's fascinating because you always see them at the shoreline.
Yeah, and that's where they are when they're foraging. But trees are very helpful to them when it comes time to go nighty night.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? If not, very, very much appreciate your time tonight. Yeah, you know what? I was going to offer to get the lubbers out, but I actually had one escape. Don't tell the coworkers. They're not as big of bug fans as I am. So if nobody wants to see the lubber up close, we can just delay that to a time when they're a little bit bigger. Right now, they're so small that when I hold them, my clumsy fingers sometimes let go. And so maybe we'll just call it a night. Very much. Oh, Meg, you've got geese on Fearsome too. Yeah, that is a rare occurrence. Speaking of weird things in trees, behind Creek Bend, no, I did not see her this year, but the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a goose nesting in the tree behind Creek Bend Nature Center, which is unusual. They usually nest on the ground or on a bridge, as we have in downtown St. Charles. Sometimes they'll nest on roofs. I kind of wonder if there's a little bit of progression in nesting behaviors of those birds, because historically they were always on the ground. Well, we think, but it's very kind of makes you do a double take when you see these big birds in places that you're not used to seeing them. All right, you know what? I'm just babbling at this point. I'm going to go see if I can work some powder through this hair and maybe go for a walk on this nice, warm, almost summer-like night. So everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. See you again next week. Peek a try. Hope I see you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye-bye.
Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.